Welcome everyone. This is episode 35 of the Transmaxxing podcast, and today's topic is the Channel 4 Transmaxxing documentary.
Yeah, it's quite nerve-wracking being on a mainstream uh, news channel, if you can call it news. Yeah, I was quite disappointed with how disingenuous he was with the way they asked questions compared to how I'd been initially reached out to. And you can see from the finished product that there is an agenda in the way that they have framed me, and just the overall dynamic, dolling me up and dressing me in a dress. It's just not my style, and I feel like they've made me out to be a caricature of someone who wants to be a woman, where I'm just not that. Although it was quite reaffirming and reassuring to see people reacting to it in comments, saying, realizing how sensationalized the coverage of trans people are, and yeah, it just feeds to transphobia. And although it's meant to be like groundbreaking and cutting edge and giving marginalized people a voice, it just ends up doing the opposite because what's being asked isn't the right questions, and it's just not really authentic.
And the other obvious problem is that he didn't want to know the answer either, like he wanted to push his agenda. And the agenda he wanted to push was the notion that people are either like true transport in the wrong body, or they are just doing it for some superficial research with nothing in between. This is total nonsense, not how people actually work. And this is why they omit the certain things, like you might want to talk about your non-binary identity, for example.
Yeah, I see myself as just a person. I don't necessarily feel like I'm a man or a woman. I feel like it fluctuates, and I'm not gonna like restrict myself, let alone other people, to labels or like necessarily pronouns either. And I think that's not really covered at all in the documentary. And I feel like that's a crucial missing piece, is that non-binary is a trans umbrella term and is just as valid. And I think that would separate me from a normie's perception of a trans person, which is going from an A to a B or a B to an A. That little distinction between a non-binary person and a normie trans person basically allowed them to get away with me saying I'm not a woman while dressed in a feminine presentation. I mean, sure, sometimes I feel like a woman, but I'm not going to kid myself and say definitively, conclusively, I am a woman, because that's just not true. That's not who I am. But they didn't explain that. They didn't explain that at all. I think that's really horrible, because now people are going to see that and see me as doing an impression of an oppressed class, basically, which isn't great because they don't need that at all. It's very telling what they didn't include as opposed to what they did. Like, for example, they try to make me out to be this basement dwelling 4chan incel, right? They come into the place where I was staying and they show off the fact I have a rabbit, but God forbid you say that I pay my own rent or have a job. They make it out as if, I'm neating at my parents' place or something, like I'm not a real established person. That transmaxing is literally my life, as opposed to like the nuanced story that I tried to put across.
Yeah, the one obvious narrative people wants to push is that we are like so manipulating people into transitioning, and this will be like detrimental for people. This is of course not what we are about. We are about people transitioning to actually live better lives. And if you do find out that transitioning isn't for you, you should obviously stop doing it if possible. Try to detransition. But of course, most people here do have gender dysphoria to some degree as well, which makes them motivated to actually pursue the transition. It's not just because they want to have some social benefits, for the most part at least.
Ben is quite a young person. He's like early 30s. So I would have thought he'd have a far more open minded view gender expression, it came across that he was talking like he was speaking for his audience, which is a lot older and doesn't really understand at all, which kind of explains why at times in the production he asked completely redundant questions, asking me to put myself in terms of a man or a woman when I was really neither. I had to explain that a few times, but they didn't include that.
I mean, the problem here is that we're dealing with a willful ignorant person who don't want to understand, don't want to listen, or want to push his nonsense. So this is not a person who cares about what you say to him because he wants to push his propaganda to people. I even heard in another video that talked about and claimed that the Transmaxxing manifesto said that it wasn't for people with gender dysphoria, where it doesn't say that anywhere. Should maybe talk about how the journalists made you like participate in the various lies and stuff.
I knew what the structure of the filming would be. It's just the tone of voice and the way that they asked the questions and got the information that they wanted was in a kind of brusque and like ignorant and impersonal way, and I kind of brushed it off as just like because his viewers see it this way, so that's why I has to ask it the way he does. And then I kind of pieced it together based off of like they took me somewhere to dress nicely, but they hadn't asked me in advance what clothes I wear or like what my style is. And they just thought, oh well, he's just ignorant incel who wants to be a woman. Let's find the most traditionally female clothing place we can find. And then no matter where he goes, he's gonna pick out something stupid so we can make a spectacle of them. Or at least that's what it felt like. I mean, although I think they had issues finding a place where they could actually film, but that's how it came across. I mean, even in the comment section, there are people that are like, oh, well, put on a dress, you're instantly a woman. Like, that was what I was trying to do when, dresses aren't usually my forte.
I think this kind of came across as well that they talked about it was like the first time wearing a dress. This may have been like was the station on this, like look at this clip, I don't think this was anything special really with it. Like the dress it isn't even like that stereotypically feminine anyway. Like the color isn't that feminine.
I mean, I don't really have much attribution to clothes in general, let alone a dress. I just see clothes as nice things that I can put on. I don't really like have much connotations to them, besides like maybe costume or like cosplaying or something.
And I think this makes sense as well because not everyone is into this like hyper feminine clothing where you wear like pink dresses with like revealing stuff. Some people like the stuff, other people just don't care for it.
Yeah, I'd say my color palette's kind of neutral. It's mostly like black, white, and red. But yeah, I feel like I give the wrong impression wearing like stuff that can be like seen as fetishizing. So like if it's too much pink or like overly revealing, I try and be conscious of that. Not necessarily because I agree with it, just because I'll be perceived that way. And the point is to, have better social interactions, not have worse ones.
Yeah, and this is also worth considering that when you're filming, if you come off as like too hyper feminine, you're going to like get turfs attacking you for that. So I think it was a good decision to choose not very feminine dress, more like non-binary representation with us kind of mature identity anyway.
Well, yeah, why would I not be true to myself? Well, I think
Yeah,
it's
well,
very obvious that they've like cherry picked from the manifesto. Like he keeps mentioning cheaper car insurance, but that's literally like the bottom thing on the Transmaxxing manifesto list of benefits for transitioning. And it's like, how can you claim to be a credible journalist when you're like literally picking through and siphoning off the worst parts and then claiming to do an overall.
Yeah, something interesting also is how they say that look how bad the Transvaccine Manifesto is. They barely showed anything about it though. Like they basically showed the most controversial parts already. and this like incel testimonial as well, which doesn't really reflect our views anyway. But I don't know, I do not want to alter some testimonial because I disagree with some opinions they express. I want to present their story as they told it. But this doesn't really necessarily reflect like my views because I include some story what someone else wrote in how they experience transitioning.
I kind of wonder which version they used. I'm assuming it's probably version 6, a heavily outdated one before my story was added. They could have used my story that was in there, but they did not.
I mean, it was filmed a while ago, in fairness. But I think 13 was the most recent one at the time.
I think 13 is still the most recent one. We haven't updated it as of recent. It's just, it seems like a common thing when it comes to this is they use the version 6 that came from like the first other article to come out of Transmaxxing. It has changed a lot and there's like a lot more friendly and like more like kind of advice that's in the manifesto now that wasn't in there before. Like it's much more normie friendly as before. I would admit myself, it was quite unhinged before.
I did actually keep some semi-radical stuff there to like upset some people because I don't believe you can really please the transphobes anyway. I think this is futile. But of course, I want to like explain myself and why I wrote it. And if he had some like objection to the Transmaxxing manifesto, he could have talked to me, but of course he refused to do that.
You know, it's interesting that of all the testimonials they found them like almost the most, I don't want to say ridiculous, but extreme cases. Like, there are plenty more grounded ones that a lot of normie people could maybe relate to. Maybe it could have been an editing issue. Maybe it could have been like they had to condense it to 20 minutes, so that's all they could put across. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. They used it in the first 5 seconds to grab people's attention. And that's what sells, really. Not credible journalism, it's just sensationalism. A lot of people thought that was my testimonial, which was funny.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great. They could have at least specified that, but yeah, I feel like they came across as if I'm like a front runner of the transmaxing movement, whereas I'm just someone who benefited from it, which is not entirely credible. They seem to give off very like traditional housewife vibes, trad wife that I'm just not.
Yeah, there's this weird thing about outsiders and like having this weird binary perspective of being trans where it's like you're trapped in the wrong body or you're like some sort of fake and fraud doing it for the benefits, and it's like it's much more like a spectrum than a binary.
There is this misconception also that people are either like want to be male or want to be female, like either a male brain or a female, but this is not how brains work. It's just like pseudoscience nonsense. Like, there are all kinds of preferences to various degrees. Some people obviously very much prefer being male and enjoy that and will never consider to transition, like even if they can get some benefits or like cheaper car insurance or whatever, they don't care about that. They want to be male because they want to look at the mirror and like what they see. For other people, they don't really have much of a preference and they just do what's convenient for them. And usually this is not a transition, they don't really think about it. If they were suddenly transform as the other sex, they wouldn't like try to transition back to how they were before, they will just continue with that instead. And there are of course people, it's very severe gender dysphoria on the other extreme that very much want to change. If they are male currently, they want to be as feminine as they can be. You with your non-binary identity somewhere in between here, and I think this gets lost for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's fucked up that they didn't agree to an interview with you guys, because, well, yeah, you guys basically run the thing.
Yeah. I feel like from how you described it, they would try to find the worst experiences that I have and highlight only that and not like the whole entire journey of transitioning, you know? Yeah, sure, there's some crazy parts along the way that may make you feel like a freak, but at the end of the day, you feel much more whole and like much more at one with yourself from transitioning, perhaps. It was for me, in my case, that I felt much more whole and like I actually feel like I belong in society now that I've transitioned.
Yeah, and this goes way deeper than like getting free drinks. Who cares about that? Or cheaper car insurance, which you don't even get in a lot of places anymore. It's a lot deeper than that. And I think people already have like social connections and a girlfriend and all that. They don't really see the value in those things they already have.
One of the points mentioned was cheaper insurance premiums between sexes.
Yeah.
That's not the case in the UK anymore, and it hasn't been for a while. So it clearly shows that he hasn't done his research around the topic that he was going to do a documentary about. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, I am actually aware of that. I did leave it in the Transmaxxing manifesto because I know a lot of people see that and repost it. So actually they kept it in for that reason partly. But of course, it's only in certain places where this is even the case. And the point in that list is actually legal sex change becomes more viable. And then I mentioned that you can get diversity hired, for example. It's not just about maybe in some areas you get slightly lower car insurance. It's just an example of
Yes, but the thing is, that's a generalized statement for anyone that's reading it around the world. But this documentary was specifically based in the UK, and I find it very interesting that all parties are from the UK, and the person that was hosting the documentary included incorrect information inside it, unrelated to transmaxing. That part was, I think, quite notable. I wasn't surprised. It's clearly there to stir up a narrative of trans panic, like the rest of the UK media. It's just a very, I would say, a very low attempt at doing so.
It's not very convincing, I think.
Yeah, he didn't ask the right questions, he didn't go into enough detail, and it felt in many ways the guy that was basically interviewing omitted a lot of the information so that the remaining information would just fit a narrative of stirring up sensation, which is typically what they tend to do.
I mean, I kind of like the fact that it's low effort because it shows people how artificial and sensationalized this is. Yeah, it's quite a low-hanging fruit subject and then just a really poor effort. I think people could realize that it's stirring, that it's not genuine.
I think this is why it's important that we have our own media and get our message across, because we cannot rely on other people to be honest about us. Because what usually happens is that some people show up here because they want to push some narrative and then they want to maybe get some interview. Then we do the interview, we do the recording, spend time talking to them. Then nothing from that recording gets published because we didn't say what they wanted to hear, so they just axed completely. And then instead they try to find something else to like support the narrative, like maybe share up some comments in the server, share up something in the Transmaxxing manifesto, which is now currently 90 pages. So you can find pretty much anything to support whatever narrative or what Transmaxxing want to push, because there are so many testimonials from various perspectives included there. I do found it interesting how the trans female told to actually defend the transvaxing, which was actually a positive surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to go into an argument, I can't lie.
What they did say is that if you're not harming anyone else, you're not breaking any law, then she doesn't see a problem with it. And I will actually go further than that.
I think she understands that being trans is, well, yeah, a spectrum. It's not a binary. You're not A or B, and you can be anywhere on your journey and describe yourself as trans. And, whichever way I choose or we choose to go about our journeys, all of them are still valid. No matter what terms or, ways we describe it, they're all still, yeah, as I said, valid. So, yeah, I think that was her overall point.
And we try to be inclusive to various people, regardless of how they like identify. Like you might identify as non-binary, you might not even care about the identity stuff anyway. You might be mostly interested in like sexual reasons for transitioning. There are people like that are mostly focused on the sexual side, and some other people mostly care about dysphoria reduction, don't really care about like the sex life. They just want to like feel like, better about themselves. And it can also be about wanting to look great when you look at the mirror, you see something you like. There can be all those different motivations. And people have various theories about why people transition, what, if anything, can cause it. And we do have some research regarding that. But what my goal is that we want to help people live better lives by transitioning. And if you cannot get the better life by transitioning, then you shouldn't do it. We are not trying to maximize the number of people that transition. We're trying to educate people, help them in various ways. And this is very much a space that does support people with gender dysphoria that wants to live better lives. It's not just for one particular thing, unlike some other trans spaces that are more specific. We try to be rather open, and I actually explained to his cameraman that what transvaxing is transitioning from male to female for personal gain, with the perception that being female will be advantageous for you. This does not in any way exclude people that have gender dysphoria, and I think I explained it to them, but of course I didn't care about that.
Yeah, there's this big thing about like true trans people, especially ones that are trans, that will like they'll hear your story of transition and they'll find ways of like butting in and like wedging in. This is where you had gender dysphoria. You're actually true trans. You're not a transmaxer. This whole thing's fake kind of thing. And it's like that's not the point. You're making up your own points about this when transmaxing's is about everyone and like just improving your lives and getting the best you can out of your transition.
Yeah, and regarding like potentially hurting someone else, like the thing is all actions you take can potentially negatively affect someone else. Like if you apply to a job, this will negatively affect the person who would have gotten it otherwise. If you make an amazing product to help a lot of people, it can drive other people out of business. They instead might lose their jobs. So like anything you do, even if it is overall beneficial for society, it will typically be some people who will be negatively affected by that. It should stop us from advancing forward, because we have to look out for what's best for the wider society. And it should guide legislation as well, that we shouldn't make transition harder only because some people might lose out on getting some cushy university job or whatever. We have to look out for what's actually best for society as a whole, even if it means that some people might have to settle for a less good job because there is someone more competent for that. And this is why I don't have a problem with people like abusing self-ID legislation for getting diversity higher if they also have some bullshit gender quotas, because I don't think that should really exist in the first place. We really have to move focus away from this like identity politics, trying to like make everyone supposedly equal between males and females, and instead look out for what's actually good for society, even if it means that some people might be negatively affected. And sure, this might come off as like insensitive or whatever, but we have to say things as they are. We cannot cater to everyone, it's impossible.
Yeah, that's a fair point you actually bring up where it's like, no matter how you like try to paint the picture, someone's gonna miss out one way or another. Like a more vague thing, someone's good luck is someone's bad luck. You finding $100 on the ground means that someone probably lost $100 on the ground.
And if you pick up those $100, it means that the other person missed out who were maybe behind you would have picked it up otherwise.
Yeah, it kind of made me laugh in my head because I was just thinking about that, and it is like you could make that argument where transitioning to have more people in the dating pool that you're in is a bad thing for you because that means you have more competition that the people that you want are looking for.
Yeah, and I hear some people talk about those things, they're upset about like losing out on privileges they take for granted because they want, because of their chromosomes or whatever, get special treatments, and this is something we oppose. I think this marks the end of episode 35 of the Transmaxxing podcast. I hope that you will have a nice day forward, and I very much thank you for participating in this and pointing out how they misrepresented the Transmaxxing and what you and we stand for.